In the heart of the Amazon, archaeologists have just uncovered the largest ancient society ever found in the rainforest. For nearly 1,500 years, a civilization flourished across a vast territory, building tens of thousands of monumental structures. But the most incredible thing isn't its size, it's what's missing. For as long as we've told stories about the past, we've equated civilization with cities, with palaces, pyramids, and population centers. We look for a capital, a seat of power, a place where people and authority are concentrated. So why did this one, the biggest of them all, seem to refuse to build them? The story begins, as so many now do in archaeology, with a plane flying over the endless green canopy of southwestern Amazonia. But instead of cameras, it was firing lasers. Millions of pulses of light per second, slicing through the dense vegetation to map the hidden ground below. This is LiDAR, and in 2026, it gave us our first true sense of the Aquiry civilization's staggering scale. The results, published in the journal Nature, were breathtaking. While a few hundred of these earthworks were already known, spotted over the years in deforested patches of land, the LiDAR scans uncovered hundreds more hidden beneath the trees. Across a surveyed sample area of more than 4,000 square kilometers, the lasers revealed a landscape engineered on a colossal scale. Extrapolating from these detailed samples, researchers now estimate that between 24,000 and 30,000 of these structures once dotted a cultural zone of over 183,000 square kilometers, an area roughly the size of the state of Washington or Cambodia and far larger than any other pre-colonial Amazon society mapped by LiDAR so far, like Bolivia's Kasarabe culture, confined to roughly 4,500 square kilometers. These aren't small mounds, they are massive geometric earthworks, perfect circles and squares defined by deep ditches and tall embankments, connected by hundreds of wide, straight roads. The society that built them is thought to have thrived from roughly 600 BCE to 850 CE. At its peak, sometime between 100 and 300 CE, population models estimate that between 1.25 and 3 million people lived here, a density comparable to some modern European countries. This discovery adds powerful new evidence against the myth of a pristine wilderness, an empty forest untouched by humanity. But as archaeologists began analyzing the sites they had mapped, a strange pattern emerged. The monumental earthworks, the very centers of this vast network, showed very little evidence of being permanent homes. There wasn't the dense buildup of household waste you'd expect from a city. Instead, the prevailing hypothesis is that these were great gathering places. They seem to have been built for periodic massive assemblies, for feasts and festivals, for political negotiations, marriages, and games. This was a civilization of millions that chose to gather rather than to settle in one place. They built a network, not an empire. For decades, the story of the Amazon was one of limitations. The thinking went that poor soils, scarce game, and endemic disease prevented large populations from forming, forcing people into small scattered groups. Discoveries like the Aquiry don't just add a new chapter to that story, they force us to tear the old one up. The new evidence reframes this dispersal not as an environmental constraint, but as a deliberate and highly successful social choice. And dispersal is exactly what sets the Aquiry apart from their neighbors. Bolivia's Kasarabe culture, for instance, built two dominant centers with 22-meter pyramids, ruling over a clear hierarchy of smaller towns. Aquiry shows nothing like it. No capital has ever been found, no settlement hierarchy, just thousands of local gathering places, connected by roads but never subordinated to one another. They achieved scale not by concentrating power, but by dispersing it across an unimaginably vast network. The question is, why? There are three leading ideas for why the Aquiry organized themselves this way. The first is a simple matter of logistics. In a world without wheels or draft animals, everything moved on foot. Concentrating a population of millions into a capital would mean hauling food and building materials across thousands of square kilometers of forest. It would have been fantastically inefficient. A network of smaller, self-sufficient communities that gather periodically for major events sidesteps this problem entirely, and it actually solves a modern problem. Eat local, and you won't need to transport food as far. The second hypothesis is political. It's based on the work of the French anthropologist Pierre Clastres, who argued that some societies aren't simply without a state, but are actively structured against the state. In this view, cultures develop social mechanisms like dispersal and an emphasis on local autonomy, specifically to prevent the rise of a permanent, coercive, centralized power. A leader's authority might be respected, but it could not be converted into absolute rule. While this is an interpretive theory, not a proven fact for the Aquiry, it provides a powerful lens. Perhaps this vast, decentralized network wasn't a phase on the way to empire, but an active, centuries-long strategy to avoid one. Finally, there's the benefit of resilience. A dispersed network with no single point of failure is incredibly robust. A local shock, a flood, a crop failure, a conflict would be devastating for one community, but it wouldn't bring down the entire system. There was no single capital to fall. This inherent redundancy helps explain how the Aquiry cultural tradition could persist for an astonishing 1,450 years. So how did millions of people actually live here? The evidence points to a profoundly sophisticated relationship with the forest they called home. We know from plant microfossils found at the earthworks that they cultivated maize and squash. Like other Amazonian peoples, they almost certainly grew staples like manioc, sweet potato, and beans. But they weren't just clearing land for farms. They were actively shaping the forest itself. Over generations, they deliberately managed the landscape to favor useful species. Two trees in particular tell this story: the Brazil nut and the peach palm. Even today, stands of these trees, vital sources of food and materials, are measurably denser in and around ancient Aquiry sites. They weren't planting orchards in neat rows. They were creating a more productive forest within the existing forest, a kind of large-scale permaculture that took centuries to mature. This required a special kind of land management. The key was fire, but not the runaway deforestation we see today. Evidence suggests the Aquiry practiced a cyclical pattern of burning. They would clear and burn the same patches of bamboo-rich forest over and over again for centuries. This kept the land open for crops and kept the ceremonial centers and roads clear, but it didn't constantly expand into new territory. The broader landscape remained a forest, even as it was actively managed for nearly 15 centuries. Of course, farming wasn't their only food source. While direct bone evidence from an Aquiry site is still lacking, comparable sites in similar terrain show that fishing for species like armored catfish in seasonal streams was perfectly viable. Hunting and gathering would have rounded out their diet. The food surplus needed for the massive gatherings at the ceremonial centers also hints at the possibility of trade, though for now, that remains an open question. The story of the Aquiry fundamentally challenges our definitions. Here was a society of immense scale and longevity, one that engineered its world with monumental architecture and sophisticated agroforestry. They supported a population in the millions. By any measure, they were a civilization. And yet, they did it all without a single city. They built a world without a capital, a power without a throne. The discovery of their vast, decentralized network suggests that perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. It isn't why they didn't build cities, it's why they chose not to. And it makes us wonder, what if a civilization doesn't need a city to build a world? This is the kind of story that rewrites what we thought we knew. Subscribe to Anthron for more of them.